Assalamu alaikum. Inshallah, we're going to resume. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa hlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Subhanaka la ilma lana illa ma 'allamtana innaka antal alimul hakim. So inshallah, we're going to resume where we had left off before. I'm going to share my screen and we're going to go back to Surah Al Talaq. And before we get into it, we'll talk a little bit about the assignment that we had from the week before. Now, it was copy and pasted into the chat earlier. If anyone happens to have that assignment in front of them, you can copy and paste it in the chat right now. Okay, I don't see anyone posting it, so here we go. Alhamdulillah. So the homework assignment was to remember that the Quran takes us out from darkness into light, and we continue to be rectified by the Quran. So to make a specific goal, allocating time for both tilawah and for review or hifz of the Quran and within our days, and try to do them choose one or the other, and do so inshallah at a time that works for you within your schedule. And so one of the things just in general about this is, for some people, tilawah after fajr works best, and hifz before they go to sleep. For other people, hifz after they wake up in the morning after fajr works best, and then tilawah before they go to sleep. So do these tasks with the intention of establishing a daily relationship with the Quran, as this will add light into our hearts and lives and help us to grow continuously. It's a source of purification from darkness. So alhamdulillah, thank you so much for putting that in the chat box. I'm going to ask from the participants, and I know right now, alhamdulillah, we have some of you on the Zoom room, which is wonderful. If anyone would like to share any of the reflections, they can put it in the chat box from trying to do this assignment. So the first reflection was that the hifz was harder and the recitation was easier, but they felt that recitation was soothing, in particular before bedtime. MashaAllah. Yes, definitely. The way that I want to say that memorization has a mujahada in it, whereas recitation tends to just be enjoyment. It's just you're receiving and you're enjoying it as you receive it. But hifz it requires a little bit harder concentration, and especially at a time when our memories are being chipped away at. The ability for us to memorize with the kinds of distractions we have, with the numbers of interruptions we have, with the kinds of things that are going on in the world, actually, it can be very hard to achieve the state of mind that's needed in order to memorize well. There's a statement, "Al-ilmu la yu'tika ba'dahu illa idha a'taytahu kullak," that knowledge will not give you any of it unless you give all of yourself to it. And again, this doesn't mean that you drop everything and just study, or just drop everything and just memorize. But what it means is that when you set aside time to study or to memorize, that you block out all the distractions. You hide your phone, for example. You hide everything that could pose as an interruption, because concentrated blocks of time that are uninterrupted and have focus within them, it strengthens our ability to learn, and it strengthens our abilities to memorize. So yeah, just giving that tip, inshallah, for the future when we're trying to memorize Quran or trying to memorize anything or study anything. Blocking out every distraction is really, really helpful. Any other reflections? Okay, no problem. Inshallah, we're going to continue then with the class. Now today, oh, there is one. Alhamdulillah. Let me look. Doing the harder one before going to sleep was definitely harder for her at first. But once she set the intention and challenged herself to do it for the week, it became easier to do, alhamdulillah. She says, I love reciting after Fajr, so alhamdulillah, that wasn't difficult. But connecting with the Qur'an this way helped me feel more whole. Not sure how else to describe it. That's really, really beautiful, mashallah. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. And one another reflection is she really appreciated how practical this assignment was. Yes, it's very practical. It's a habit. It's a habit we're trying to keep and grow, and we're building on something now. And this week there's a little special something assignment, inshallah. I think it's going to help us all. Inshallah, I think it's going to help me. It's going to help all of you. And it's related actually to the tafsir of this week. And because of it's the last verse of the surah that we're on today, what we're going to do is we're not going to take the allegorical commentary just yet. What we're going to do is we're going to take the tafsir for the verse of this week. We're going to take the assignment for this week. And then next week, we will complete the surah by going through all of the remainder of the allegory, because the allegorical commentary is a lot. So if I would have presented on allegorical commentary this week, I don't think we would have had the time to actually thoroughly go through the last verse. And so I thought it would be better for us to simply combine and then do a conclusion. So the last verse of the surah, it's a beautiful verse. I love this verse. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الله الذي خلق السبع سماوات ومن الأرض مثلهن يتنزل الأمر بينهن لتعلموا أن الله على كل شيء قدير وأن الله قد أحاط بكل شيء علما. God it is who created the seven heavens, and from the earth the like thereof. The command descends among them, that you may know that God is powerful over all things, and that God has encompassed all things in knowledge. So this verse is, I think, very comforting for us, especially given the time and the situation that we are living in and living through. It's an affirmation of the lordship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the complete control that he has over everything, that he is the creator who created the seven heavens, and then from the earth the like thereof. So both Imam Ibn Ajiba and in the study of Quran, it discusses this, and it mentions that the creation of the seven heavens has been discussed in different places in the Quran. Sab'a samawat is discussed in many places. But the idea that the earth has similar levels as the heavens, that this is the only verse to really allude to the seven earths or lands. And this is supported by a hadith of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And subhanAllah, how like as soon as I read this hadith, you know, I knew that the tafsir, subhanAllah, that we were going to have today was going to really be relevant to whatever is happening in the world. And this idea that there are seven earths and what the scholars have said about it, but also how the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he has made reference to the seven earths, what does he say about the seven earths? He says, whosoever usurps a span of land unjustly, it will encircle his neck on the day of resurrection from the seven earths. And so this is mentioned in the tafsir of Imam al-Qurtubi. It's also, this same narration is mentioned in the tafsir of Imam Ibn Ajiba. And again, so this, in light of this hadith, the verse is understood to mean that there are seven lands upon each other, right? That they're like layered, okay? And I know we've discussed it in tafsir before in this class, but here, this is the actual reference point in the Quran of when it's being referred to. وَمِنَ الْأَرْضِ مِثْلَهُنْ, okay? And from the earth, the like thereof. So the seven earths. So this hadith of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what it means is that the one who takes a land unjustly, it will encircle their neck on the day of judgment, this land that they have taken. And it's not just the first layer of the land, but all 7 layers of, and you know, when layer is not necessarily like the best word, but I can't find an English equivalent to the word tibaqa, right? Because tibaq is this idea, it's similar to how the skies are, the 7 skies or the 7 heavens as they're referred to, right? So in the heavens, they're one layer above the next, right? It's the first heaven, and then above that, the second heaven, and then above that, the third heaven, and then above that, so on and so forth. So it's a layering of the skies. So what's being mentioned here is that the earth is similarly layered in 7 levels. And so all 7 levels of whatever land a person has usurped unjustly will actually encircle their neck on the day of resurrection. And so this is, subhanAllah, when we're looking at the oppression that's happening against our brothers and sisters in Palestine, that from the get-go, their land was stolen. From the very beginning, it was stolen land. And they keep stealing more land, and they keep the Israeli government and the Israeli army and the settler colonial project keeps taking more and more and more lands and homes from the Palestinian people. I think there's some comfort to know that all of this land, whatever they're taking, and its 7 layers, will actually encircle the necks of the oppressors on the day of judgment. There's oppression that happens on this earth, and people may get away with it, but there's a day of accountability where no one will get away with a grain of sand. No one will get away with anything on that day. So they may have escaped certain kinds of accountability. Maybe the United Nations can't stop them. The most that anyone is doing right now is a slap on the wrist. But on the day of resurrection, and this idea of eternity, forever, that goes on, our minds cannot fathom the idea of forever. There is an accountability that will be lasting. And it gives me comfort to know, when I look at the carnage that's happening to the Palestinian people, that there is an accountability for this, and that, alhamdulillah, the ummah of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is not powerless, because Allah has ordained this particular tribulation, and He will do what He wills with the oppressors. It says, but the 7 earths or lands can also be understood, and this is like a lesser, I shouldn't say call it a lesser, it's a minor opinion. So because of the word mithlahun, like them, in tafsir literature, most of the mufassirin, and Imam Ibn Ajiba mentions this as well, they considered the 7 earths to be about the layering, and especially because of the hadith I just mentioned. But also, this was the way that they understood it, the majority of mufassirin. Now, a minority opinion amongst the mufassirin is that the 7 earths or lands can also be understood as a reference not to the 7 levels, but to the 7 lands spread across the earth, like referring to, for example, the 7 continents. Okay, so, and that's mentioned in also the tafsir of Imam al-Qurtubi. There's a statement that's attributed to Imam Ibn Abbas. And so something that's like just to note here is Ibn Abbas has a tafsir. Now, certain things are attributed to him, and there's 2 works of tafsir that are attributed to Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu. They sometimes have opposing opinions. And so one of the interpretations is that one of those tafsir is considered fabricated and not necessarily, or it's not necessarily his, not necessarily fabrication in the sense that what's being said is false, but that it's been falsely attributed to him, that it was perhaps the opinion of someone else. So in this particular narration, it's been said that Ibn Abbas says about this verse, were I to tell you of the interpretation of this verse, you would disbelieve, and your disbelief would be your denial of it. And that particular narration is mentioned in the tafsir of Imam al-Tabari. Okay, so what this indicates to us is that I don't disbelieve in this particular narration, by the way, of that's being attributed to Ibn Abbas, because the Quran has verses that are clear and it has verses that are mutashabihat. This idea of the earth having seven, like the seven skies, is going to be something confusing, and it's going to be something that most people will not really understand, and that some people, Allah will give them special knowledge of what this means. And Ibn Abbas was from the companions who had special knowledge of the Quran. So for him to say, for this to be attributed to him, that he said, were I to tell you of the interpretation of it, you would disbelieve. You wouldn't believe it. It'd be so wondrous that you would not be able to believe what it actually means. And then if you were to disbelieve that, then you would be denying it. And so he's not going to tell us the meaning, because he doesn't want us to deny it. It's actually better, subhanAllah, to be in a situation where a person affirms the verse and affirms its meaning and simply says, I don't know. This is something maybe that's from, the scholars have their different opinions on it, and I believe in it, but in the end, Allahu Alam, I don't know. And what's interesting is Imam Ibn Ajiba also, when he talks about this verse, he mentions different opinions, and at the end he says, Allahu Alam. Right? He says the majority opinion, he says the minority opinion, and then he says, Allahu Alam, God knows best what the real meaning of وَمِنَ الْأَرْضِ مِثْلَهُنْ. But we do know, because it's mentioned in hadith, that there are seven earths that are like the seven skies. Now, what does that look like? What does that mean? What's the reality of that? What's the metaphysical reality of that? Allahu Alam, God knows best. The last part of the verse, which mentions that the command descends among them, that you may know that God is powerful. So here, among them, meaning among the seven heavens and among the seven earths. So it can also be seen as an allusion to the universality of the revelation, because the command can also be seen as the revelation, the wahi of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala descends among them. So it's first off, it descends from the heavens, and then it descends onto the earth. And so the universality, that the whole world, basically the revelation comes from within above the seven skies and through the seven skies and encompasses the whole world. That's one of the interpretations of that meaning. Now, Imam Ibn Ajiba also talks about this verse, and what he mentions in terms of Allahu alladhi khalaqa as-sab'a samawat, in terms like Allah is the one who created the seven heavens, is that there is ijma', there is consensus that there are seven heavens, there's seven skies. There's no ambiguity. The scholars, the mufassirin, they all say that there are seven skies, and that these seven skies are layered one above each other. Okay, so they're not seven skies that are next to one another. One sky is above the next, and the next sky is above that one. He mentions that between every sky is the distance of 500 years. And then he says the thickness and the denseness of each sky is like that as well. So the distance of 500 years, the thing that came to mind when I think about a distance of 500 years is something that I had learned a long time ago. One of the scholars had mentioned that all of what we are exposed to by either the human eye or by satellites, in terms of human travel, and what, the furthest distance that we can fathom from planet Earth is still within the realm of the first sky. All of what we know and all of what we can see is still within the realm of the first sky. The distance of 500 years of travel, I think this is, also kind of like I'm thinking about the time of Imam Ibn Ajiba. This is before the time that we had a rocket ship that went to the moon, right? Before NASA, before Neil Armstrong landed on the moon and whatnot. And so 500 years is essentially a time that we cannot fathom. It doesn't mean exactly 500 years. It means beyond anything that we could fathom. The distance between one sky and the next. And then each sky is like that compared to the one before it. And then he says that, and the earths are like the skies. And he says that the majority say that this is referring to seven earths that are layered one above each other. And this idea of tibaq, they're on top of one another. And then he also says between one layer of the earth and the next, in this meaning, in this vein, would also be like the distance of 500 years, like the skies. Now, something that's, if you were to think about the earth and the mantle and the core and, all the different layers of earth, is it referring to something physical, or is it referring to something that is unseen and metaphysical? Are there layers that the human eye does not see? And this is where Imam Ibn Ajiba, he says, Allahu A'lam. In every layer of earth, he says, are its dwellers. And the scholars, they debated, who are the dwellers of the different layers of this earth? Because we as human beings are exposed to one another who live on top of the earth. What about the layers? Because the belief, the majority position is that it is layered one above the next. Not that it's referring to continents, although the continental understanding is the minority position. So for those who hold this majority position, they said that the dwellers of the different layers of earth are going to be the jinn, again, beings that we do not see, as well as the angels. Dhahak was what answered the question about, can you see all the skies, all the 7 skies? And he said, you can see, he said that there's 2 positions. He mentioned there's 2 opinions on this. The first is that you can see the sky. And here he says the sky, meaning like, again, the first sky. And the proof is the light that shines through it. That's one opinion. And then the second opinion is you cannot see the skies, the 7 skies. And that even within the first sky, you can't actually see it. It's simply that God just lets you see the light that pierces through it. So what you see is light that God allows to pass through, but you're not actually seeing the extent of where that first sky ends. Ibn Abbas, radiallahu anhu, he says there are 7 lands separated by oceans. So now here's where there's a different narration attributed to Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu about the same concept, about the 7 earths. Now, the first one was that if I told you what it really means, you wouldn't believe. And then if you didn't believe it, then you'd be rejecting it. So I'm not going to tell you. That's in the tafsir of Imam al-Tabari, a very early tafsir. This one, Ibn Abbas is saying that there are 7 lands separated by oceans. Each one of these lands is shaded by all the skies that are layered above it. And it's said that the earth is one, right? So all of the earth is one, but the 7 continents are the separation of the lands within the earth. And it's made to seem, they say that it's still similar to the skies, or it's described as being similar because of the magnitude of each continent, the size of each piece of landmass, and that which it contains. Imam Ibn Ajiba, he says that the first opinion about the 7 skies being actually layered is more correct. يتنزل الأمر بينهن. Right, so يتنزل الأمر بينهن. The command descends among them. All right, so among them is what? Among them is among the 7 skies and the 7 earths. So now what is this command? Imam Ibn Ajiba, he says it's God's decree runs over them, and he carries out his commands and his rulings in them, or his laws in them. Qatada, he said, in every sky and in every earth is a creation, right? And then each creation has its characteristics. And he says, and the command is carried out by Allah, and the decree is carried out from his decrees. And he controls its affairs, all of the affairs of the 7 heavens and the 7 earths, from the rain that comes down and the growing of vegetation and the alternation and the timings of night and day and the seasons of summer and winter and the creation of animals that inhabit different parts and different places. Imam Ghazali further comments on this, and he mentions that the command of destiny, right, this is the divine decree, descends from the presence of divine lordship, right? So this is where the qada comes from. This is where God's command comes from the presence of his divine lordship to the bearers of the throne. So the first to receive the command then, or to know the command from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is going to be the angels that are the bearers of the arsh of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of the divine throne. And then these angels convey it to the other angels, the angels of the seven heavens, who receive that from them. And then they direct these divine commands, right? That which God has decreed to happen, to the people of the earth, and carry them out accordingly. There's another position about what this means, يَتَنَزَّلُ الْأَمْرُ بَيْنَهُنْ, is that revelation itself, the wahi, is revealed from the highest of the seven skies, or the seven heavens, to the lowest of the lowest earth. And then لِتَعْلَمُوا أَنَّ اللَّهَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ. He did this so that you can know his power encompasses everything. So that you know that he is powerful over all things. لِتَعْلَمُوا أَنَّ اللَّهَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ. He has power over absolutely everything. وَأَنَّ اللَّهَ قَدْ أَحَاطَ بِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ عِلْمًا. And that God has encompassed all things in knowledge. Now here, Imam Ibn Ajibah, he comments, and he says certain things that if you are taking Shaykh Fuad's class in theology in our seminary, or if you've taken it before at the Majlis, alhamdulillah, he has explained this a number of times. So this is where there's a crossover between the tafsir and the theology that Shaykh Fuad teaches. He says that it is impossible for the one who created everything and who has the full command over all that exists to not also be the all-knowing. So this is an essential quality of God, for him to be all-knowing. Sifat al-Dhat, again, which you may have taken in his theology course when he talks about the 13 attributes, or 13, yeah. So this is a description of his essence, that his knowledge, he is the all-knowing, he has to be. And it's what's mentioned is that it is impossible for the one who has power over everything, and the one who's fully in control of everything and who has created everything, to not also be the all-knowing. They must necessarily be the all-knowing. And you can look at some of the arguments within this in the Ilm al-Kalam, the rational proofs that are discussed relating to why the all-powerful creator and the one who commands everything that's in existence must necessarily be the all-knowing at the same time. And Imam Ibn Ajibah, he says, everything we see and know of in creation, and everything we receive from the revelation, and even all of the amazing marvels that we see in what people have created, right? Al-Masnu'at, that which man has made, that all of that is encompassed in God's power and his knowledge, that not a single element of every wonder that we ourselves witness in the created world, in that which has been revealed to us in terms of revelation, or in that which human beings do themselves, is outside, not a single bit of it is outside of God's power and his all-encompassing power and his all-encompassing knowledge. And that concludes the outward sort of commentary. But I was going to also add to this, because this verse is significant for us, and for us to reflect on in terms of how do we relate to this meaning ourselves. Part of it is that when we say God, it is who created the seven heavens, right, and from the earth the like thereof. What we're talking about is the mulk, right? The mulk is the world of this. You could say the world of this life is in the mulk, right? Or the kingdom, or the dominion, the absolute. So when you say one of the beautiful names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Malik al-Mulk, right? The absolute sovereign. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he mentions this this particular name of his in the Quran, in Surah Al Imran, قُلِ اللَّهُمَّ مَالِكُ الْمُلْكِ, right? Say, "O Allah, the absolute sovereign." Or Malik al-Mulk can be, also translated roughly as the king of the mulk, of the dominion, right? So that what's within the dominion of Allah, well, it's not limited to this, but it includes this, which is the 7 heavens and the 7 earths. He is the absolute sovereign, the one who wields absolute control. He who knows, Imam Ibn Ajib is saying this, he who knows that Allah is the absolute sovereign will not seek a dominion from any other besides him. They will not seek mulk, right? They will not seek anything in this world from anyone else except for Allah, and will not attempt to manage anything in his dominion alongside him. Meaning, they do not believe, and they do not seek to manage something, quote unquote, next to God, right? Like alongside him. How is this different than guarding over that which benefits us? Alongside him would mean that the person subconsciously or consciously assumes they have independent power to do something outside of God's power and knowledge. They believe, right, subconsciously or consciously, they may believe that they have independent power to do something that is outside God's power or his knowledge. So we as Muslims, according to our aqidah, we would reject this completely and totally. Definitely if it was conscious, but at a subconscious level, does this happen to people? Yes. At a subconscious level, people forget, and especially during times of tribulation, and especially during times of great suffering, it's easy for people in those times to forget that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is actually the one in control of every single thing that exists, every blade of grass, every drop of water in the ocean, every grain of sand in the world. And so nothing escapes his power, and nothing escapes his knowledge. And he has not just full power, but the command, right? Al-Amr. He has full command over everything in existence. And so one thing just to note here is that we as Muslims, we believe, and I'm saying this, I'm finding myself repeating this a lot, especially as what we're going through. We as Muslims, we believe in the divine decree, right? We believe in the divine decree. I think I mentioned what, I might have accidentally skipped it. No, I didn't skip it. Alhamdulillah. I mentioned what Imam Ghazali talks about in terms of the command of destiny descending from the presence of the divine lordship, and then to the bearers of the throne. So it's coming to Allah, from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from the divine presence to the bearers of the throne, and then from them to the other angels who fill the 7 heavens, and then they are the ones who see it carried out on earth to the people of this earth and all the things that are related to it. So this is really important for us to know. I mean, we have these insights into the unseen that are given to us in revelation, that are given to us from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that has been discussed by our scholars throughout the ages. We believe that the pens have been lifted and the ink has dried. We do believe this. And at the same time, we also believe in choice and will, and the idea of reward and punishment, and the idea of the Day of Judgment. I mean, what was mentioned in the hadith even before we got into the talking about the way that the command comes, is that whoever takes any land, usurps, wrongfully steals any land from someone else, it will encircle their neck. And not just the land itself, but the 7 layers of that land, or the 7 earths of that are related to the earth that they stole, will encircle their neck on the day of resurrection. So we absolutely believe in accountability. And so we hold both of these together as believers. We believe that we have choice. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ tells us to guard over that which benefits us. If we see the Day of Judgment coming and we have a seed to plant it, that we try our best, right? And then we have tawakkul in Allah. We put our, we do whatever efforts that we have capacity over, that are beneficial. We do those things, and then after that we leave everything. We have faith in God that whatever happens after that is khair, is not just what's good, but inshallah it is it's the best, in the sense that it's nothing in the realm of possibility is better than what was, because of the fact that he has divine knowledge. He has all-encompassing knowledge. So a lot of the horrors that we see, knowing that we only see a fraction of its realities, and really I would say like less than 1%. That's how much we see. Less than 1%. Much less than 1%. And so for us, something appears as a horror, and we don't see the other side of it. And yet we also know that because he has all-encompassing knowledge, nothing escapes his knowledge. Nothing escapes his knowledge. That for something to actually occur, it occurs with the divine decree. Right? So that means that it wasn't just khair, it was what's best. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not have to tell us about the afterlife and how things happen in the afterlife, but from his mercy, to make things easier for us to understand, even though we still, when we know these things, we still don't fully understand them because our minds cannot encompass them. We don't have all-encompassing knowledge, and we don't have all-encompassing power. We're a creation, so necessarily ours is going to be very limited. But out of his mercy, he tells us some of the asrar, some of the secrets. From the secrets that he has told us about is that those who are martyrs, their passing, for example, is no more than a sting of a mosquito or the sting of an insect bite. Now, I don't know if any of you have ever been bitten by an insect, but many times when this happens, we don't even realize we've been bitten, right? That's how light, later on we find the insect bite and we realize, wow, I was bitten by a mosquito or a bug or a spider. We didn't notice it at the time. So the passing, other people who receive great rewards in paradise and high ranks in paradise, before they die, they will go through sakarat al-maut, right? The agonies that happen before a person passes away. But the shaheed, the shuhada, the martyrs, they don't go through any of that, because they're passing. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Prophet Muhammad, he tells us in hadith that the shaheed does, their passing is like as light as an insect bite. And again, many people will have an insect bite and not even realize that they were bitten. So what we see on this side of the world, what our eyes see, is suffering. We see pain. We see bloodshed. We see bodies. We don't see the soul that was taken very gently and very beautifully into its final abode, being, greeted by the angels. Some of the faces, I saw an image where they were removing the cloth from some of the faces of those who had been killed in Gaza, and they had huge smiles on their faces. I don't know if anyone else saw that particular picture or those images. And it was like from children to adults to women to men. They had huge, like they literally died, and the last thing on their face is a big smile. And they're taking the things, off the face only to find a smiling body. So we have no idea what these souls have. We have an idea, but we don't have a reality of what they experienced in terms of their passing. We know that for eternity, this category of people have the highest ranks with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in paradise. The shuhada have from the highest ranks. On the day of judgment, they have no accountability. Everyone stands in front of God, and their good deeds and their bad deeds are weighed. The shuhada are not judged according to their deeds. They skip all of the hisab. They take 70 people from their family with them to paradise. They are, in paradise, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks the people of paradise, after he has shown them all of the beautiful things that he would give them, is there anything else that anyone wants from me? And everyone in paradise, they say no. How could we want anything else? You've given us everything. And the only category of people that in Jannah they will actually say something different than this are the shuhada, are the martyrs, where they will say, send us back to the earth so we can die again for your sake. And this is something that for our minds and our brains and our created limitations, it's very hard for us to understand this. Like these are people who are in paradise, in bliss, in front, they're having this conversation with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I don't want to use the word front, but they're before him, they're in his presence. And they're having this conversation with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in paradise. And you can't even fathom what's in Jannah. And we already know that they have the highest reaches of paradise. The shuhada have very, very high ranks for eternity. And for them to say in that place, in paradise, when everyone is asked, do you want anything else? The only people who still have something to say are the martyrs, who will say, send us back to earth so we can die again for your sake. What does that indicate to us? Is that in their passing, there's something that was unfathomable to any of us, something that was a pleasure or a sweetness or a secret, that they experienced in their passing was so great that even in paradise, they remember it and they long for it. So I'm just mentioning these things because our knowledge is so limited. What we can see is so limited. God is greater than time and space. He's not limited by time and space. He's not limited by linear human history. Everything that is going to happen and what has ever happened, it's all within his knowledge. He has pre-eternal knowledge. Okay, so nothing escapes him. None of this suffering escapes him. He is Malik al-Mulk. He is the king of the dominion. He is the absolute sovereign of everything that exists. And you can say that many of the things that we don't understand now and that we have difficulty with on earth, in the next life, and again, Allah did not have to tell us these things, but from his mercy, we know that there is these kinds of rewards and these kinds of eternal gifts that he gives to people who go through these things that we see with our eyes. This whole life, our entire lifetime, you put it, take infinity and divide the numbers of years any of us will live, and it will be infinity, which means all of our lives, from the person who lives the longest to the person who doesn't live very long at all, in comparison to al-akhirah, or in comparison to the eternal home, infinity is nothing, right? Infinity divided by any number is infinity. It's literally nothing. People on the day of judgment, when they're asked, how long did you live? They'll say, oh, it was like all of our lifetimes was just like a morning or an afternoon. So again, this is just a reminder that that God is powerful over all things. No one has gotten away with anything. No one will ever get away with anything. And his knowledge encompasses all things. He's fully aware of the oppression that is happening, and he has his promise that he has promised those who are from the martyrs, and he also has his warning of what he has promised those who are from the oppressive. Now, going back to this beautiful name of God, Malik al-Mulk, we connect with this name by seeking complete free disposal over ourselves. What does that mean, Malik al-Mulk? Meaning that we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who is the king of everything that exists, right? He is the absolute sovereign, we willingly, lovingly surrender to him, saying, we want you to take charge of us. We want you to allow us to do all that's pleasing to you, right? So we like submit to God in this way. He is the absolute sovereign, and we actually want to, God's in control of everything, right? He's the Lord of everything and all that exists. The Muslims are the ones who knowingly and lovingly accept this and surrender to him, right? Islam is to submit. So the way that we connect to him, to this beautiful name of his, is by submitting to him and seeking that whatever it is that he is most pleased with, that's what we I should say that's what he commands for us to do, and that's what we strive for at the same time. And then the cultivation of this name in our character, Imam Ibn Ajibah, he says, you should cultivate this name in your character. And this is something that is part of our assignment this week. You should cultivate this name in your character by controlling your ego, your desires, and all of your states. So we cultivate this aspect. So God is in charge of everything, right? But this idea of guard over that which benefits you, right? This hadith of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he says, the strong believer is better and more beloved to Allah than the weak believer, but there is good in both. Guard over that which benefits you, seek God's assistance, and do not lose hope. And if something should befall you, say, قَدَرَ اللَّهُ مَا شَاءَ فَعَلَ. Say, God ordained this, and he does what he wills. Do not say, if only I did such and such, right? Do not go back and say, if only. Do not say if, because if opens the door to the works of shaitan. So this particular tradition of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, I think, is really potent, and it fits within what we're talking about in terms of believing in God as the creator, as the one who has the divine decree, as the one whose command, is carried out in this world, as the one who nothing escapes his knowledge on one hand, right? And then if something befalls us, we simply affirm God's lordship in these things. We say, قَدَّرَ اللَّهُ مَا شَاءَ فَعَلَ. God ordained this and he does what he wills. And we don't say if only about anything that has happened in the past, because we know that that is from God's divine decree. But what does the Prophet ﷺ encourage us to do? He says, guard over that which benefits us. How do we connect with this beautiful name of God? Is actually that we seek to be in control of, he says, controlling our ego, controlling our desires, and all of our states. All of our states. Now, in the time that we're in, when we are, you could say that we're exposed to a lot of images on social media, on the news and whatnot. In order for us to really guard over that which benefits us, we have to make a choice about how much we will consume and absorb from everything. If we're spending 5 hours a day on social media, it will cause us to lose hope. It will cause us to become incapacitated. If you're spending all of your day listening to the news, you may not even be able to pray. You may not even be able to do anything. So the name of that we're talking about of Allah is Malik al-Mulk. And so I'll type it in the chat box. Malik al. And so Imam Ibn Ajiba, he also talks about this concept of, exerting control over ourselves, right? So he is the sovereign of all that exists. He owns all that exists. How do we connect to this name? How do we cultivate this name in our character? Is we control, right? Allah controls all these things that are beyond our control. But there are certain things he has put in front of us that are part of our control. And those are our immediate choices. And Imam Ibn Ajiba says to direct our attention to controlling ourselves, controlling our egos, controlling our desires, and controlling our ahwal, our states. Now, we do this in two ways. We do this through muraqabah, which is to watch over ourselves, right? And to be in conscious awareness as we're watching over ourselves, that God is also watching over us. And then also something else called musharata, which is to set conditions for ourselves. And then muhasaba, which is to hold ourselves to account, right? So Allah will hold everybody accountable on the day of judgment. But how do we again cultivate this quality within us as we hold ourselves accountable in this life before we are held accountable by Allah? And so I want to talk a little bit about this muraqabah. It's also translated as vigilance. Imam Ibn Ajiba, he says vigilance or muraqabah is a permanent awareness that the Lord perceives us. Or we could say that it is to observe what is due to God, both in public or private, free of illusions and with sincere veneration. This idea that's mentioned in terms of ihsan is to worship Allah as though you see him, and then even though you don't see him, knowing that he sees you. That sense of knowing God is watching me, God is watching me. God is watching me. And so you're watching over yourself because you know that God is watching you. All right, that's muraqabah. That's you also exerting this watchfulness over oneself helps us to do the next part. So Imam Ibn Ajiba, he says that vigilance is the source of all good, and the degree to which we realize it will determine the degree of our contemplative vision. You could say the mushahada, this ability to witness God. He says, if our vigilance is profound, so shall be our contemplative vision. He says, for people of the outward, people are busy with the outside world, vigilance means to guard the limbs and the body from slips. It means just to guard yourself from sins and the things that are forbidden. For people of the inward, it means to keep the heart from following every passing thought. So it's not just that you're controlling your limbs. The next level is to control every thought that goes in, the khawatir, every thought that goes in. And are you going to reject the thought? Are you going to accept the thought? Right? Where is this thought coming from? Being very careful with thoughts, because thoughts are the beginning of all behaviors. And thoughts are the beginnings of spiritual states as well. So he says, for the people of the inward, it means to keep the heart from following every passing thought, the khawatir, and also distractions. People of the inward are looking to make sure their hearts are not getting distracted. And then for people of the most profound dimension of the inward, it means to keep the innermost soul from reposing in anything or anyone other than God, meaning they are always centered with God. They do not find rest or find comfort in anyone else. It's they're with God and they find their comfort with God. Their returning place, their beginning place and their returning place is with God. So this is it's a very, very high level. For ourselves, inshallah, we're going to incorporate this within the assignment this week, but it's related. Vigilance is what you do throughout the day. Vigilance is what we do throughout the day. Okay. We're watching ourselves and we're trying to pay attention to our deeds, that we're not doing the things that God is displeased with. And we're also paying attention to our thoughts and our spiritual states. How are we feeling? What are we thinking? Are we following desires? Are we following the ego, or are we following that which God's pleased with? Right? That's what vigilance is. And we need a lot of that during this time that we're going through as an ummah, in order for us to guard over that which benefits us. Now, the next part is the part that we enact that which benefits us. And that's self-reckoning and setting conditions, muhasaba and musharata. So self-reckoning, Imam Ibn Ajiba says, as muhasaba, is to call ourselves to account for wasting our precious moments and breaths, right? The nafas. Our rizq in this life, like we will only be alive for as long as the number of breaths that have been decreed for us. We will not live a breath more than what has been written. No one will. So we want to, muhasaba is to call ourselves to account for our precious moments and for our breaths. And then he says, in other than different sorts of devotions to God. So if we're spending our breaths in things that create negligence of the heart, or negligent deeds or even sins, then we're going to hold ourselves accountable for that. He says the time for self-reckoning is usually at the end of the day, right? So before we go to sleep. At the beginning of the day comes the setting of conditions. Okay, this is called al-musharata. To set, shart is a condition. Al-musharata is to set conditions. This means that we say to ourselves, here is the start of a new day, a day that will bear witness for or against you. So make every effort to fill its hours with what brings you closer to God. For had you died yesterday, you would not have had the chance to achieve the good that might be your salvation today. Okay, so that's like talking to yourself in that way. He says this self-reckoning should be done as night approaches and in the time before dawn as well. And you should maintain this practice until the presence of God is established in your soul. So basically, this is a lifelong thing. This is, for the most part. So it's lifelong in the sense that until he says that the presence of God being established in our soul means we already know that God is always with us. He's closer to us than our jugular vein. But there's a point in which we are with God. Okay. We have a ma'iyah with him. As he says, to do this until you are essentially always with God. You are never for a moment without him. And that's a level, right? And this is the level of the awliya. This is the level of like the intimate friends of God. He says, when this happens, time will be as one, immersed in the consciousness of God, and there will remain neither the reckoner nor blamer, right? Meaning you won't be having to do that as much, or you won't be having to do that, he says. So for as long as the journey lasts, the setting of conditions will come first, and then the self-reckoning last, and vigilance always. But once upon arrival, neither the first nor the second remains. Vigilance is always there, but musharata and muhasaba is like what helps us to guard over that which benefits us. Okay, and muraqaba, no matter, even when we have this this idea of God's presence being established in our souls, we will continue to have muraqaba, which is the state of knowing that God is watching us at all times, and we're watching ourselves because God is watching us at all times. So the assignment then, how are we connecting all of this back to the assignment for ourselves? We had a goal for Qur'an in the morning and for Qur'an at night. Now, in the Arabic language, when there's an alif that's put, so for muhasaba, there's an alif. What that really means is that it's not just you counting something, because that would just be hisab. But muhasaba occurs between two parties. And usually the two parties are going to be between you and yourself, right? Or you and yourself while you know that God is watching you. Similarly, musharata, setting conditions, it's between you and yourself, and again, knowing that God is watching you. Muraqaba, similarly, it's you and yourself, you know God is watching you. We're going to add something to the previous assignment, which is, I want everyone to think about someone who's a good friend of theirs, someone who maybe they're in touch with the most throughout the week, okay, from their friends. Someone that is, if you're a sister, a beloved sister to you, and someone who you consider like a soul sister to you. And for the brothers, someone who's like a beloved soul brother to you. And this is the person maybe that you're the most, maybe you text them the most throughout the week, or maybe you call them the most. They're the person that you regularly already connect with, okay? And inshallah, everyone here has someone in mind. I'll give you like 10, maybe 30 seconds to think about that. Who is that person? Bring that person to mind right now in your heart, okay? And what we're going to try to do now, what we did in previous weeks is we just did it on our own. What we're going to do in this next 7 days, inshallah, is to hopefully witness what it's like to do something. And we've done this before, but what's nice is now we're doing this particular assignment again with a person that is like this for us. And we are in the beginning of the day, we're going to let that person know what our goals are for the Quran that day. So that's where the musharata, you can send them the text and say, this week, my goal is 15 minutes in the morning, for example, and 15 minutes at night. It could be more than that. It could be less than that, but you let them know, this is what my goal is for in the mornings, and at nights, you let them know what your conditions are. And then at nighttime, before you go to sleep, you let them know whether or not you met your own conditions. So now you have the shart, you have this setting of conditions for yourself, but you're including your sister in faith, or you're including your brother in faith in this. And you could be ambiguous. You don't have to give them all the details. You don't have to say exactly what your goals are, but you will say something for them. And you are also going to report to them at night. And throughout the day, you're going to watch over yourself, inshallah. We're all going to watch over ourselves to strive in order for us to fulfill these things. And from the blessings of suhbah, right, like good companionship, is that good companionship helps us to do the things that we want to do for ourselves in order to draw closer to God. So suhbah makes difficult things easy, okay? Being in good company makes things that normally might be a little bit more of a hassle for us, gives us that extra push. And I'm not talking about riyah. We're not talking about showing off to anyone, because like I said, you can keep the goals ambiguous to them, you know? But this idea of that check-in in the morning and that check-in at night, that sense of positive peer pressure, like you have someone who's going to help you get there. That inshallah, if you get, and if that ideal situation, if there's someone who's taking the class with you, is that you do this mutually for each other. They give you their check-in, you give they give you their conditions, and you give them yours, right, for the week. And then at nighttime, when you do the muhasabah, did I accomplish my goals with the Quran? Then you also provide that sense of accountability for each other. I was successful today. I was not successful today. I wasn't able to do it. I only did half of what I intended. I did more than what I intended, alhamdulillah. Whatever that case is, you do your muhasabah with one another, inshallah, at night. And again, you can keep it as ambiguous as you like, or as, not ambiguous. But the idea is to do this particular assignment with a sense of support and spiritual companionship, and guarding over that which benefits us. I can say that reading the Quran alleviates so much distress. There is a shifa in the Quran. There's a light in the Quran. Our hearts during these times are in need of the Quran. We're in need of the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's so much comfort in them. Just this verse, when I read it and I looked at the tafsir today, brought me so much comfort. It was a reminder of God's power, of God's all-encompassing knowledge. Even the fact that the earths are going to be, anyone who usurped earth, all 7 earths will come around their neck on the day of resurrection. Like, subhanAllah, there's so much that we get from a regular relationship with the Quran. And it feeds our hearts, it feeds our souls in a way that then helps us to guard over things. So then it creates capacity, right? It takes away the spiritual blocks. It takes away the emotional blocks even sometimes. And so then you can send emails to your congressman, you can go and do the things you need to do, all the different good deeds that are related to guarding over that which benefits us in the context of helping the Palestinians and making dua for them, and making people aware about what's happening. By keeping our souls healthy and strong, we are able to do more for them. And Quran is definitely a part of that. And so this is the assignment for this week, inshallah. Barakallahu feekum. And we have gone over time. Inshallah, we'll close with dua. Just want to make sure everyone here has a partner in mind for their assignment, and you're just continuing, inshallah, what you had before. If you want to add something to what you had before, you can, but you have a partner. You're telling them these are your goals for the 7 days until next week. And at the end of the day, at nighttime, that's when the muhasabah happens, when the accountability happens. You kind of let them know how things are going every night. So you're so think about 7 text messages, inshallah, before next, before we meet again. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم وفقنا لما تحبه وترضى واجعلنا من عبيدك سعداء وأمتنا على كلمة الهدى علمنا ما ينفعنا ووفقنا للعمل بما علمتنا به واجعل ما نحن فيه خالصا مخلصا لوجهك الكريم آمين يا رب العالمين. اللهم اجعل تجمعنا هذا تجمعا مرحوما وتفرقنا بعده تفرقا معصوما لا شقيا منا ولا محروما وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. O God, give us success to attain what you love and are pleased with. Make us amongst your felicitous servants. Allow us to die on the statement of guidance. Teach us what will benefit us and give us the success to act upon what you have taught us. Make that in which we are engaged pure and devoted to your noble face. Ameen, O Lord of the worlds. O God, make this gathering of ours a gathering enveloped in mercy, and our parting thereafter a parting of our sins purged and forgiven, not one of us wretched or deprived. And peace and blessings be upon our Master Muhammad and upon his noble family, companions, and followers. Ameen. Thank you all for joining. Inshallah, have a good night. Assalamu alaikum.